Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. I actually think I pressed on the wrong stream, so hopefully our friends will figure out the right stream and join us shortly. So, even though it says admonishment and criticism here, we're
Oh,
actually going to be talking about righteous indignation, which might, be maybe a Freudian lapsus that I actually clicked on admonishment and criticism connected to righteous indignation, because usually that could be an unexpected side effect. But anyway, so I'm Ayasoma, and I'm here with Bhante Jayasara. We're spending the Vasa here at Empty Cloud Monastery. And as mentioned, tonight the topic of the Sangha panel is righteous indignation. So yeah, righteous indignation. Maybe I'll share a few words and then I'll pass it on to Bante. But this topic is something that comes kind of like on a recurrent basis. Like whenever we speak about anger, usually one of them frequently asked questions is like, yes, but what about in that particular circumstance, or what about in that other particular circumstance, or what about if I am, the victim of oppression, or what if I see people being oppressed? So then there is a strong, perhaps instinctive, emotion of anger that pervades the mind, and we feel like we're right to be experiencing what we're experiencing, and sometimes it also gives us perhaps the feeling that it gives us energy to fight for what is right, or to stand our ground, or to tell right from wrong. And there's kind of like the idea that if we get rid of this anger, then maybe we'll become a sort of doormat, and not not be capable of confronting anything that is unwholesome that happens to us or that happens to loved ones around us. So tonight maybe we can discuss um, a little bit this, and whether or not there is something like righteous indignation, whether there is actually something like a type of anger that is appropriate, that is correct. And well, I would say that actually, spoiler alert, I think the answer is no.
yeah.
But before we get to the actual answer, there is a process, there is a path. And so the first noble truth is the acknowledgement that there is suffering. And actually, the emotion of anger is both actually an experience of suffering right here, right there, and also sometimes comes into being, like as we were saying just now, comes into being when we are exposed to other people's suffering, or perhaps our own suffering as well. And so there's, whenever we are experiencing any type of emotion or any type of suffering, there's lots of things that are kind of like all this big bundle, big knotted, twisted mess. And my experience has been, and still is, of the practice to somewhat start unraveling all these bits and pieces and kind of understanding what is what, rather than kind of labeling it big jumble mess and maybe appropriate or inappropriate or whatever, and kind of like carrying it along. Instead, we want to untie it, unwrap it, and see, okay, distinguishing wholesome from unwholesome, for example. Very good, very wholesome. Great, I want to keep that. Anger, not really great. Actually, it feels quite uncomfortable. Feels really terrible for myself, and actually, it's also unbeneficial for other people too. So we can go, okay, so critical thinking, yeah, that's great. hmm Yeah, maybe I want to nourish that. Maybe I want to cultivate that. Anger, maybe I want to starve that out. And instead of being perhaps propelled by in our actions by anger, perhaps instead we can actually find another sort of springboard. Perhaps we can actually cultivate the conditions for compassion to arise in the mind, and act for benefit and the benefit of others out of compassion. So it's a little bit a few words that come to mind on this subject matter. And hello to Richard and Jason and Rick and Vivian, who all have found the right stream.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I think there's definitely some interesting stuff going on with the streams and with so little people here.
Yeah.
People coming in and out. I think they're
discovering which one is the stream. And
I think you can actually edit the title of the stream while you're doing it. So you can.
I'll pass it on to you, Bante, so you can share some thoughts on that.
All right. So, righteous indignation. So, as we're existing in the world, we experience things that bring up agitation. They could be something that we think things should be a certain way and they're not, or people should do something a certain way and they don't. Many different experiences that can arise during our day and our night, during that we can experience, that bring up indignation. Indignation is kind of like an agitation, an anger. Right? We expect something to be a certain way, and it's not that way, so we're agitated. Now, sometimes, from our perspective, we feel this agitation, this anger is justified. This is what we call righteous indignation. Righteous means like, I am doing something, I am doing the right thing for the right purpose, for the right cause, etc. The problem is that we're all ignorant, that we all have delusion. We don't see things clearly. So our first mistake is that we do not question the anger that arises, the righteous indignation that arises. We don't question it. Of course, if we're not practitioners, if we don't practice mindfulness in general, we don't question anything that arises in our mind. We just automatically accept it. But this is an important thing that needs to be done. Because, many people have done many bad things in the world. And almost all of those people were not being like, oh, I'm going to be an evil. No, they thought they were doing the right thing. They thought they were being righteous. And they turned it out to be pretty evil people, right? Or they did things because it was for the ends justified the means, right? Sometimes you have to crack a few eggs to get an omelet and all these kind of things, right? So one of the huge dangers with any kind of anger, any kind of righteous indignation, is that you're wrong. That's the huge danger, right? So anytime this arises, the first thing to do is to question it. It's the first thing to do. Don't just automatically accept it. I feel righteous indignation. Do I have any justification in this at all? Is this good at all? Is this right at all? And if it's not, well, then you let it go. So, well, there's nothing for me to do here. Right? We get all kinds of righteous indignation for the stupidest reasons, for reasons that are not really justified. So even something as silly as like, somebody cut me off in traffic, so I'm going to get in front of them and then slow down so that they can't go faster, and all these kind of things, right? It was like, I am justified in doing this. And this is where we get this kind of, it's very easy to fall into this this human, very human mode. You look at history, you see this all the time, of I am doing things for the right reason, so therefore I can do whatever I want to the people who are against me. Right? You see, you look out like Superman and you see, oh, people that need to be saved. And then you see, oh, oppressors. And then you are automatically justified, because your righteous indignation, to do all kinds of horrible, bad things in the name of your righteous indignation. So this is why it's very, very important to question, very important to reflect. Right? The Buddha, when it comes to anger, right, the Buddha says, the Buddha is asked, what is the one thing that Buddhas approve of killing? And the Buddha says, anger, with its honeyed crest and poison root. So what is that simile the Buddha is giving there? Honeyed crest, right? It tastes good. It feels good. Righteous indignation. I'm going to go out, and fight the bad guys and right the wrongs and all these kind of things. It feels good. But what the Buddha is always saying there is that no matter how good, no matter how right it feels, it's poison. It's poison. So, what do? Right? Say that you examine your righteous indignation, and you do see that there's something that needs to be fixed or changed. Even so, even if that's still true, the Buddha tells us quite clearly that when our mind is full of anger, when our mind is full of lust, hatred, all of these things, it's like trying to see our reflection in a pool of water, and it's boiling, or it's muddled in some way. You can't see your reflection. And the Buddha says, just like that, if you act out of anger, out of lust, out of all these strong emotions, out of fear even, then you don't know what's best for yourself, you don't know what's best for others, or both. So if you are thinking that you are coming from an angle of being compassionate, wanting to help, wanting to change, wanting to right the wrongs, and if that's really truly what you want to do, then you should always remember, question, and then act with mindfulness. Don't act out of anger, even if the anger is pointing you towards something that is correct, that needs to be fixed, or that you feel should be fixed. If you act out of anger, you're just going to make things worse. So if your heart is really in trying to fix something, to do something right, then you want to do it with a calm mind, mindful mind, so that you can see all of the ways to, all the opportunities, all of the ways that you can act in a skillful way. Otherwise, all of your good intentions turn into evil actions. It's not a good thing. So I guess that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Bante. And if any of you have any questions or comments, feel free to type them in, since you're now finding finally the stream. And we'll address them as we go. And in the meanwhile, what just comes to mind is also the fact that we should also remember that, of course, if we're experiencing anger in the mind, it's not that we're bad people, we're bad Buddhists, and we're going to go to hell as if brought there, but rather it's just it's a very human human experience. Also, the Buddha, before becoming a Sambuddha, actually, as I've been saying over and over again lately these days, if you've been watching the streams or if you've been coming to Empty Cloud Monastery, I seem to always quote the same same quotes of the Buddha when he talks about himself as an unenlightened bodhisattva, and says, in fact, that thoughts of greed, hatred, and delusion appeared in his mind, and he evaluated them and pretty much suggest something along the lines that Bante J was pointing out. So looking at these thoughts and going, are these beneficial for myself, or are these beneficial for others? Are these beneficial for myself and others? And kind of really doing this analysis. But also understanding that, of course, it's normal that they're there. So we have certain habits of mind. We have certain strong habits that we have cultivated within this lifetime and also previous lifetimes. That, of course, not because, all of a sudden we were born Buddhist, or all of a sudden we converted to Buddhism, or all of a sudden we started practicing meditation, or all of a sudden all of the above, like that anger disappears. I wish that would be great. Really wonderful. And maybe for some people that is actually possible, but that is through, also a lot of past karma, a lot of good deeds that they have done in the past. But for most people, that is not the case. So what we need to do is understand, how do you say in English? Look at this anger, look at this, like acknowledging it. That's the word. Acknowledging what is currently happening, seeing what it tastes like, what it looks like, what it feels like, understanding also the gratification, because it feels really damn good. You know what the honey tip of righteous indignation is? It's the righteousness. Righteousness is delicious. It's really sweet. Like high-end cuisine. But the poison root is, in fact, the anger. So when we actually also see the danger of it, the poison root, how it feels really bad, also physically, and not only in the moment when we're experiencing it, but also afterwards. So we actually have a lot of opportunities to really see the somatic, the bodily feeling, the Vedana, the unpleasant feeling of this anger throughout for quite some time, and also see this is actually kind of really a big waste of time in the best case scenario, and quite harmful afterwards. Sometimes you can even have a stomach ache, or like all sorts of bad repercussions, even on the body, even on the health. So that, of course, is definitely one of the symptoms of the poison root, and also it poisons pretty much everything else that we're doing, because we're this grumpy person in the room. Even if we're the most right, we can say like, oh yeah, like I'm the most depressed person in the room, and everybody maybe wants to sympathize with us, but we're so grumpy and horrible, and maybe some people after a while are gonna go, maybe you deserve it, sister. Quite intolerable. So we see that maybe we're not actually achieving also what perhaps is in our best interest, if we are the object of what we think. We have been we've been subjected to all this really bad, harmful things. But still understanding what it's like, looking at it, and not feeding it. So there's something very different between experiencing anger and building up anger and acting upon anger. And so that is something that we're doing. So the anger that we're experiencing, that's essentially vipaka. That is effects, it's consequences of previous actions, previous habits that we have done, who knows when. So that's vipaka. And we can't really do anything once it has arisen, whether it's an action that we have done before, like 2 minutes ago, or 2 years ago, or 2 lifetimes ago, whatever it is, it has been done. So all we have is the result. But once we get that result, whether we act upon it or whatever we do with it, that's new karma. So not acting upon it, for example, is new karma. It's a new action that will have a new result that leads towards a cessation of suffering rather than the increase of suffering. So we can't control the consequences, but we can control the causes. So that's where it's very important to look at our experience, understand it, don't get into the guilt trip, but rather, yeah, just see what can I do right now. And perhaps even we might make the same mistake again over and over again. But instead of pretending that we're right to do this thing, or that that is the best action, instead we can analyze, we can look at what is this tendency, how is it manifesting, and how it's affecting us in the first place. Because that's, first and foremost, the person that we are poisoning whenever we are experiencing any type of anger, righteous indignation included, who we're poisoning is ourselves, first and foremost. So we are the first people who are actually experiencing it, and we can see it for ourselves. And then, of course, it's not beneficial for anyone. But first and foremost, it's like something really, really damaging for ourselves. So yeah, let's see. Here I see a few people that are typing in. So Magyar Hall says, what degree of criticism of media is appropriate? Among the public critique of the first three women by Matthew Weinstein of the Therigatha, is it best to leave things alone or to be more proactive? Ante J, since I've been just talking for a while, I'll give you the hot potato.
Well, I think it depends on what's within your sphere of influence, right? A lot of people kind of skip their local sphere and try to go to try to go after like big issues and big things. Like they just kind of leave all these levels and they go there, right? So when it comes to things like this, this first free woman, I know all about this thing because actually the how shall I say, fight against it started in my own community with Ayasudama. But I like, I'm not really like a senior monastic, nor do I have any kind of, like, for me, when I saw this, I was like, okay, well, I mean, there's a part of me that cares, but on the other hand, I'm not really bothered in a way. Like I'm just because there's the case of this, it was the publisher said it was a translation, but the author said it wasn't a translation, and it's not a translation. So there's all kinds of issues going in there. And so for me, I didn't really do anything about it. I had a view of it, and I supported Ayasudama, and that's what I did, right? So I kind of just figured out, thinking about, do I need to be involved in this at all? If I am, what do I do? And basically, because the person who started the campaign to have this stuff changed was somebody I knew well and is part of the community I'm part of, then I supported them, and that was it, and so you have to take each individual thing that arises and figure out what you can do about it, when to let go, when to be like, well, I can't do anything about this. And then once you kind of figure out what your best action and what you can do in that specific situation, then you do what you think that you can and need to do. So each individual situation, there's lots of nuances and there's lots of things to think about before just jumping in, right? And this is something that humans do very, very well. And we can see this quite well in the world today, even in America, is kind of jumping on teams, right? It's like, oh, I'm with this team. No, I'm with that team. The other side's wrong. I'm on this team, these kind of things. So we want to not be like that, right? We want to investigate, question, think of if you need to act, and then how you would act, and then if you need to act, then you do.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Bantim. Yeah, I would just add that based on your first question, what degree of criticism of media is appropriate, that also reflection on what is our intention. So, as Bante mentioned, it's very nuanced. So, really, the work is ours. We need to do the work to understand what is the intention. So, it's not that, getting back to the second part of the question, whether the monk who did a public critique of that particular book was correct in doing it or was wrong in doing it per se. And then we can kind of copy and paste like, okay, then from now on, I'm never going to go and do critiques, or from now on, I'm always going to do critiques. It's not really like that, but rather it's always investigating our motivation. So, for example, if we need to present criticism, is it actually because we want to share some information that might help others grow in Dhamma, or correct perhaps whatever kind of wrong behavior or wrong understanding they might have in Dhamma? And this, besides this book or any other book or media in particular, but rather any kind of situation, well, then in that case, it's very good to present our criticism. And this is actually kind of, maybe that's why admonishment and criticism appeared, because it's actually very much connected to that. And the person who receives that admonishment and criticism, if they're actually rooted in Dhamma, they will be really, really happy to receive that. I've always been very, very happy to receive criticism and admonishment whenever it was rooted in Dhamma, whenever people had my best interest at stake. And actually, in fact, there is all sorts of forms within monasticism where we invite people to admonish us, because once again, that it's kind of like everyone else has all this like insider information on all your defilements that your deluded self is completely oblivious about. So you're like, yeah, please give me some, give me more. I want to know all of it. So that's great. So if our intention is that out of compassion and the good welfare for either one person or many, then yeah, I think that's a very good thing good intention. If our intention instead is to humiliate whoever we think has done something wrong, or for everyone else to hate that person, to do either public humiliation or maybe a just face-by-face humiliation, or to feel more intelligent, to prove how much better we are, more intelligent, more educated than the other person, or to kind of like look at the fault that they have made and just point on that just for the sake of being right, well, all of that gets into the realm of unwholesomeness. So yeah, when in doubt, shut it out. I would say. So yeah, there's not one size fits all, but rather there's investigation of the mind, which is the fun thing about Buddhism. And Rick asks, can you share some reflections on unhealthy spiritual idealism, and how this relates to righteous indignation? I have witnessed some practitioners who inflict their spiritual ideals on others.
I don't know that this is necessarily connected to righteous indignation. Maybe righteous religiosity, but it doesn't necessarily have to do with anger per se. I think I've witnessed some practitioners who inflict their spiritual ideals on others. Yeah, well, I think that this is one of the pitfalls of any kind of view, right? Whether it's Christian, Judaism, Muslim, Buddhism, whatever, you'll see people in that have various views that kind of are quite pushy about it. right? They're quite overbearing about it. And yeah, I mean, and sometimes that's done by the sword, and sometimes it's just done by words. But this is kind of human behavior, right? And in terms of Buddhism, you know, I think most people kind of go through this period in the early time of their practice where they kind of they become like a proselytizer and a debater, right? Like they feel so strongly about their newfound, views and traditions and things like that, that and they're not quite yet, like, they haven't gotten to the point quite yet where it's really firm and secure, where, like, if somebody comes and says the Buddha was stupid and didn't exist and there's no nibbana, and you're like, "Oh, no, it's not, that's not true," right? Where somebody who's a little longer is like, okay, whatever you believe, that's what you view, like, it has nothing to do with me, per se, right? So and when people are kind of in that, like, fundamentalist slash insecure kind of, you know um early days of something that's new and that has been beneficial to them, yeah, they can be like that. Or people can, use their ideals as a cudgel, as a weapon, right, to maneuver and to do things like get power, whatever. um yeah, I mean, I think that's just par for the course of being a human being and dealing with other human beings.
Right, thank you, Bante. And so it says, are you saying the arising of anger is actually the result of previous actions rather than the cause of unwholesomeness? So I don't know exactly what you mean by the cause of unwholesomeness. So the cause of unwholesomeness, well, it's just something that you've done in the past. Because it's not that, for example, the Buddha had any cause of unwholesomeness like appear creating anger in his mind. Absolutely not. So there is, once again, we do actions in every single moment, and those actions have results. I mean, this is not rocket science. Like, we kind of like accept that that's how we function in the world, like day to day. It's just that in non-Buddhist circles, we function that way for, I think, 80% of like our experience. And then 20%, we're kind of like, okay, that's random, that's arbitrary, that's like completely not, there's no cause and effect. Instead, with Buddhism, we're like, actually, the 20% works exactly like the 80%. It's all interconnected. It all has principles of causality and nothing is random, which is great news, because since it's not random, since it's something that we have agency in, then that means we can actually correct it. That's why enlightenment is possible. It's something that we can actually put the conditions in order to get that result. It's not something mystical that all of a sudden we wake up and we're like, boom, well, I'm enlightened, or, or Bante J starts like spreading like some rays on me and I'm like, oh, enlightened. I mean, I wish it was this easy and great, but no, it's actually something that we need to understand that is dependently arisen. Right? If I want water in my glass right now, I need to pick up the bottle and need to create the conditions, pour the water, and like then I'll have water in my glass. But it doesn't just kind of like manifest on its own just by sort of wishful thinking. So yeah, whenever anger arises in the mind, it's something that we've done in the past. It's as simple as that. And when we understand that, we also understand that it doesn't belong to us. Like, it's not who we are. It's just something that we're experiencing right here, right now. And it's a temporary condition. So then we're left with, what am I going to do right now? Am I going to act upon this anger? Or am I actually going to do something else? Not act upon it, which is another form of action. That, though, leads to a very good result. So I hope that that answered your question. I don't know if Bhante, you have anything else to add.
No, I think that was good enough. Yeah.
Right, and Magyar Hall says, what about criticisms of Dhamma teachings? Some suttas mention not to argue about Dhamma. If someone is wrong and disagrees, it is worth addressing to correct the mistake. I think they're talking about only this is true, everything else is wrong. One of my favorite stanzas in the canon.
Yeah.
Bhante?
Is it worth addressing to correct the mistake? Depends. If the person is like a friend and is open to that kind of thing, then yes. If not, then it's fine. Just don't try to beat it into them, right? Don't try to, what's the old saying? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? So, and we're not like Christians. Right, like for Christians to try to get somebody to be saved so they don't go to hell. I mean, that's kind of like an eternal thing, especially if like their relatives, like they don't want to, like I don't want my relative to go to hell forever, so I have to make sure that they're saved and become a Christian and stuff like that. As a Buddhist, like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, they have wrong view. I have wrong view. They might go to hells, but yeah, eventually they'll maybe become awakened. Who knows? Like, you can't really like own somebody else's karma, So I'm not going to try to go out and try to force. You have wrong view, like Aya says in the same. This is that you don't know the Dhamma. What you said first should be last, and what you said last should be first, and go off and rescue your thesis and things like that. No, that's a waste of time. That's a waste of time. One of my favorite sayings from the Buddha that I reflect on often is the Buddha says, "Bhikkhus, I do not dispute with the world disputes with me. A practitioner of the Dhamma does not dispute with anyone in the world." And that's an ideal to live by. That's like, oh yeah, why am I wasting all my time going on the internet and fighting on the forums or Twitter or whatever? You don't have the right view. I have the right view. You should all these times. There's not enough time in life to do that. So if somebody has the wrong view, and no, I'm not gonna like try to go out of my way to try to force them and say you have a wrong view, yada yada yada. Now, I mean, if there's somebody I engage with, and there's somebody who I who might listen to me and who is like part of my community, or like who I'm living with or something like that, and I feel like maybe I can kind of over time talking to them, and we can have a discussion, and then maybe like something might arise from that. That's one thing. That's a different thing. But going out of my way to try to give everybody right view around me when I don't have right view fully myself, it's kind of, and not even a Buddha would do that. Buddha doesn't have time to try to force everybody to have right view. So yeah.
Bhante. And Shadow Label says, can you guys define righteous indignation to help me come up with relevant questions? Bhante, do you want, since English is your first language?
Well, yeah, and I remember maybe about a year ago, actually, because I all these words, I always want to make sure I have the exact definition. And I remember like going on dictionary.com and looking up indignation, and it's like, it's anger. It's anger, resentment, agitation, the feeling that something is not wrong, is not right. That's what indignation is, right? And righteous is, that the feeling that you are in the right of acting upon this wrong.
Okay.
You're like the Batman and going out and being vigilante and beating up all the bad guys because, well, they're just bad guys. That's all. Or whatever, the knight that goes out and beats up people, these kind of things.
Yeah, or simply that you're right and you get angry.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite defilements. Like, I'm totally right. Oh. So yeah. That's basically what it is. If you're wrong, I mean, hardly you're gonna get I mean, or it lasts a little time and then you kind of go straight to regret. But when you're right, it can last for a long, long time. You're like, oh, that idiot. I can't believe they said that. Oh my God, I hate them so much.
That's where understanding the nature of being in the samsaric state and lots of compassion and metta comes in.
Yeah. I'm so glad to this practice because I stopped spending so much time just hating righteously things. It's such a waste of time. The other thing is that like we have, a day that is like 24 hours. As a part of it, we need to like sleep. So like that's already, not, you can't really use it that much. All the rest is literally how much time do we want to invest in things that are wholesome and how much time do we want to invest in things that are unwholesome? So when we actually think about it that way, we're like, okay, I'm allocating.
Yeah, allotting. Yeah.
Not good. That was the first time I use allotting.
Yeah, very good.
Allotting this time for anger, and then you're like, wait, what? That's crazy. Why would I do such a thing? Oh, let me free it up. Oh, I can do some loving kindness meditation. Oh, that feels much better. Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's much better investment.
I can see on somebody's schedule from 3 to 4. That's my allotment for anger. It was like 1984. There's like 3 minutes of anger. Now everybody's angry during these 3 minutes.
Yeah, but I feel like that's also the process of mindfulness, because then all of a sudden you start realizing how much time you waste on like stupid things in general, and then like harmful things. You're like, okay, this is not only like stupid, but it's also harmful. Like, I'm completely insane.
I think some of these are probably best for tomorrow, to be honest with you.
So Kumu says, how best to handle people born Buddhist but don't consider them practicing when they expect us to have 100% sila at all times? I guess this is not really, I mean, it's kind of connected to what I was saying earlier, so I will address it. Well, to understand that, what are you going to do? I mean, we have robes. So if you think you have a little bit of pressure, Kumu, just put a robe on. As soon as you put a robe on, everybody expects you to behave like a fully enlightened being. Except that the Buddha says clearly that if all it took to become enlightened was to put a robe on, then we would go where babies are born, and the moment they're born, and we wrap them up with this like ochre cloth, and bam, they would like all become enlightened. So obviously it's a process, it's a practice. And these are all sila, samadhi and panya are all to be developed. So of course we need to be realistic with ourselves that, as I was saying earlier, that it's a path. It's not just a pill that we swallow it, anger disappears, but it's a path and it's a practice. So we need to understand that all of these defilements of mind, first we need to see them, learn them, and let them go. And we also need to understand that people will have all sorts of expectations from us and from themselves as well, right? That they're not acting like proper Buddhists, or they're not acting like, fully awakened beings, even though clearly they're not fully awakened beings. So you can't control others, but you can't control yourself. So you can relax with yourself and go, okay, yeah, I'm unenlightened and I messed up. And what am I going to do about it? I just, take these precepts again and, commit to practicing the teachings and not be bothered too much with what others are saying, or like too many expectations that they have. Or you can just apologize and say, sorry, I'm not enlightened. I'm glad that you have perfect sila all the time. Let me know if you have any advice actually to share. Maybe actually you're surrounded. You think they're not practicing, but they're actually all enlightened beings. Who knows? And Bhante, I don't know if you have any suggestions.
No, I think that's fine.
Okay. And Canute, good to see you again. Oh, I think that picture is Canute as a little boy.
Yeah.
Adorable. Okay, I find that to the expense that I practice equanimity, it helps with anger. But it's so hard when it comes to those who I love. A family member has a health concern, and I want to scream, a therapist and medications will help, and the family member is resistant. And I find at times I get so angry, but behind that anger is fear. And I tell myself, just be kind, metta, metta, metta. But oh my God, it's so hard. Oh, I mean, extent, not expense. Okay. Well, I'll just say one thing and then I'll pass it on to Bante J since I've spoken a lot. But the classic, never ending, always timeless saying that we have in monasteries: when you think you're enlightened, go and see your family, or have your family come and see you. I mean, I've like to my parents. Well, my mom is currently here, but my parents are, spending the summer here in close to the monastery and at the monastery. And wow, I'm like, oh, I really need to work on this. I need to work on this. And whoa, I thought I had overcome this, but look at this defilement that is coming up. So yeah, of course, like we have so many attachments with all our family members, and we have the attachments that we remember in this life, but most likely for countless lifetimes we have developed those like strong bonds. So it's really difficult to deal with. And yeah, be gentle with yourself, try your best, and sometimes you'll scream because you can't you just can't help it. And then you're like, okay, well, that sucked and that wasn't really beneficial. And then you commit yourself again to the path. Bhante, maybe you have other.
All right, my friend. So I would say that you have wise words.
Oh.
I just want to
Sorry.
The wise words that you said here is you understand where this is coming from. You said, and I find at times to get so angry, but behind that anger is fear, right? So this is something that like a meditator can see, right? An average person might, I'm just angry, they should do that. But then I realize actually what's driving this is fear, right? So that's really it's not necessarily in that situation that you're working with your anger, you're working with your fear, right? That's what you need to work on in that situation. So it's very easy, isn't it, that we kind of see what's best for our family members, but then when our family members think that they see what's best for us, we don't agree with it. All right, we don't see it. It's like, oh, they're just trying to be overprotective or being annoying or whatever, right? So this is one of those things where this family member, what can you do? Right? So, a situation like this, if they do need that kind of help, being pushy about it or bringing it up in ways that bring up defenses. As soon as those defenses are up, it's done, right? Anything that you try to do, it's not going to work. You have to retreat. So the idea is, how do you help them see that they need help for themselves in ways that are subtle, beneficial, and not going to cause that defensiveness to arise. And on the other hand, for yourself, it's kind of practicing letting go, right? The fear that's arising is the attachment to that person. Obviously, we want our family members to stay around for a long time and to be with us, because we have attachments to them and we love them and things like that. But sometimes we just have to let go of the fact that and understand that it's their life and it's their karma, and all we can do is just try to be as supportive as possible and hope that they will eventually get to a point where that they see for themselves that they need help. Right? And sometimes they need to have some kind of a scare or some kind of thing happen to them to shock them into that. Until then, it's working with the fear, working with letting go, and understanding where the anger is coming from.
Thank you, Bhante. And Rick asks, can we apply principles that are commonly used to maintain harmony in the community to heal or overcome the harm that is done when someone in the Sangha is fuming with righteous indignation? Answer this.
Principles used to maintain harmony in a community to heal and overcome the harm. Well, so it depends on what you mean by principles used to maintain harmony in a community, because there's lots of ways that you can, a community can seem harmonious or having the same view and such, but really what's happening is like there's authoritative, pressure from the top, or there's all kinds of reasons why a community might seem harmonious, but it's really not, right? So the harm that's done when somebody in the Sangha is fuming with righteous indignation. I think a lot of times if somebody's in a situation like that, what really helps is just being able to being heard and knowing that you're being heard. I think that's an important thing, right? That you might not be able to actually do something for them, but the fact that they can kind of vent to you is a good thing, right? Like that you can, that they can come in and talk to you, right? And kind of vent their frustrations. And that venting actually can often kind of help a person come to a more equanimous state, right? And then think more mindfully and more clearly. The active listening, right? That's called active listening. That is part of community harmony, right? If people don't feel like they're being heard, then they're not going to be harmonious in the community. So that's what I would say. Active listening is one of those principles that can apply for this. Yeah.
And Sud asks, is this related to dependent origination? Anger arises, I guess it's an unpleasant feeling in the mind. Then there is craving to change the situation and we act on it. Then transforms to becoming the angry action and thereby causes more problems. Is this the correct way of understanding? Then I guess not acting on the anger and not owning it, I guess, would result in pleasant becoming. So have a lot of passages. 1 second. Anger arises as an unpleasant feeling in the mind, and there is craving to change the situation. I think you're ready, though, at a later step. I would say that, if you have to put it in the phases of dependent origination, first you have to see the source root of everything, which is avijja, which creates the conditions, essentially for, your consciousness to enter into contact with all the perhaps thoughts and ideas and whatever it is, like the object essentially that then creates the sort of the mind to get involved and have then an unpleasant feeling, which then creates essentially all those triggers, and then a bunch of suffering essentially in the mind, and we keep repeating it over and over again. But we can get a little bit too constructy, a little bit too intellectual about it. So I would say that in this case, my recommendation would be to close the book. It doesn't matter to map out necessarily everything with the 12 links of dependent origination, but rather experience it. Look at it in your body. How does anger feel like? Like literally seeing the experience. Or even if you're not like an angry person, I can't imagine you to be angry. Actually, Sud, you're always like so joyful, and that's what we met.
Never know.
We met him in person. It's like one of the most, beaming with loving kindness all the time. So I was like,
Sometimes it's the quiet one, the ones that look like full of metta. No.
But I can see you having some irritation here and there. So maybe you can focus on the irritation, the feeling of irritation, and literally look at the quality of the experience, of the unpleasant experience. And also, then, what is your natural instinct? Like, what do you want to do? How do you want to act upon that instinct? So observing all of that, at least from my experience, has made it, you look at it closely and you start understanding it. And then you're like, I don't really want to engage in this. It's not beneficial. It clouds the mind. It depletes me from energy. People around me find me insufferable. There was a time when I was like waking up in the morning, and when I actually got woke with a bunch of different dynamics on having a female body that I was oblivious about. I remember I would wake up in the morning and I would turn around, say if it was Mate J, I would think, white cis hetero patriarch born to oppress me.
Yeah.
And I would just have like this mind full of hatred that then would pervade my experience the whole day until I would find another cis hetero white patriarch to hate, which would then keep on fueling. And then you're in this kind of state of existence, and all of the people, whether they were white cis hetero patriarchs or not, they were like, all right, she's a little crazy. How about we stay away from the Italian lunatic? So at a certain point, while I was practicing actually meditation and seeing all of this really unpleasant experience, state of existence, I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this to myself? Actually, none of these people around me are doing this to myself. I'm actually doing it myself to myself. Because essentially I'm creating all those conditions for unwholesome thoughts to populate in the mind. And even when there were situations where maybe perhaps something was happening, still, you have to actually cultivate those feelings and those thoughts in the mind. It's just really unwholesome. It's really unwise. So it's the process of wisdom to understand how harmful this line of thinking is for ourselves and how unproductive it is too. So that's how but we need to learn. We need to first see it and not pretend like, oh, it's there, or intellectualize it too much, because then we're not really experiencing it. But I don't know if you have any.
No, that's fine.
Okay. Jay Kala says, one of the things I won't miss from anthropology is the deep involvement with social injustices and things. Lots of righteous indignation, but good causes. There are lots of important issues, but the environment tends to brew an attitude of justified anger.
Boy, anthropology must have changed in the 20 years since I took it as a major. Because anthropology was not like that when I was the anthropology major. But yeah, that's not really a question, though. Is it just a comment?
I think the environment maybe, that can, climate change and everything can be triggering, since we're on the verge of an apocalypse. Do you have any words to say?
No.
Okay. Maybe Jake Ala, if you have a specific question, then Bante will address it. Or
what I would say is this: any kind of issue, any kind of thing that's happening, try to be as diverse as possible in understanding like the different views of what's happening. That's all I'm going to say. It's like never trust just one group or one thing. Try to learn and try to listen to all the different sides of any situation. And that can help you to come to a bit more of a nuanced understanding of things. And I think that can also help you to be less wrapped up in one particular view, or be less likely to be kind of co-opted as a foot soldier or what they call a useful idiot in politics for somebody's ideology or view. So the more you learn about a subject, the more you understand from a variety of different ways, the less fearful it gets. Right? The more you know, the less fear. And even if it is something that's quite strong and dangerous, still less fear. Because the more the more that you know how to face it, and then fear goes away.
Okay, thank you. And Shan says, one thing I've noticed with righteous indignation is the infatuation with what ought to be and
Well, as Bhante says.
As Bhante says, the Batman phenomenon, where we strive to correct this perceived mistake of existence. Should we aim to let go of this perception of what ought to be and instead accept what is and do what we can skillfully? Well, Ness and Yo in the sense that I'm a little bit hesitant to say yes, because it just, from how you phrased it, to me, it sounds a little bit leaning towards the passive of like, oh, I'll just do what I can skillfully, but let me take a nap first and like not really bother, because I mean, you can't really fix samsara, etc., etc. And that's actually like a very kind of lazy sort of attitude that we have, both towards samsara and also towards the ultimate. I mean, it's kind of like, actually, remember when I did my first metta retreat, I was like, the first day, I was like, all right, so may everyone be happy. I mean, that's clearly like not possible. So like, why am I going to spend all this time wishing for all sentient beings to be happy? This is so stupid. Literally, like, I don't know why I came to this Buddhist retreat. It's the most stupid thing that anybody told me to wish, as a skeptical kind of, harsh person. But so that's not the point. The point of metta meditation is not obviously like aspiring for, sorry, my English is not my first language, so I'll try my best to use it skillfully. So we don't want to transform the world in this like happy and healthy, populated place, because samsara is not a perfect place by definition, right? So there is not that, but we still put a lot of effort in wishing for everyone to be happy, developing that mind state in the mind, imbuing our entire mind and throwing it in all the different directions. And when you see, for example, when you meet people who have developed really well loving kindness, which happens in particular, I have to say, Sri Lankan monastics have it. I don't know, like there's something about Sri Lankan monastics and the development of metta, like kilometers away, you're like, oh, there's a metta bomb. Yeah, it's just so contagious. It really has an impact, and actually immediately you're soaking it in, even though you're actually not doing the practice. So there's something incredibly beautiful. And I would say that when taken skillfully, also, like doing any type of social work, any type of activism, so to speak. Of course, we need to have a goal for the betterment of everyone. I wouldn't have rights, actually, if there hadn't been so many women in the past century that in America fought for the conditions for me to have rights when I was a layperson, and also a lot of women who actually did lots of work and fought in order for me to actually be capable of ordaining, just like the Buddha had allowed people with my body to ordain, and his body as well. So that's awesome. That's great. That's wonderful. And all those people made incredible good karma, really good actions that were for their benefit and the benefit of many others, including myself. So obviously there is a tangible effect. But to think, okay, well, now the world will be completely happy place, or if only there wasn't, for example, sexism in the world, then everybody will be happy. Well, actually, that's narrow-minded thinking. That's not concrete. That's not rooted in reality. So we still try our best, and we still have goals, but we want to do those as part of our Dhamma practice, as part of our cultivating paramis, as part of our opening the heart and doing good things that are sometimes can have actually really good and tangible effects on people around us that we can see. So yeah, in a way, then yeah, do things skillfully. But I felt like I needed to add a few more words. Oh, and Rick has a follow-up to what you were saying earlier. I'm talking about the principles the Buddha shared with monks who are not getting along.
Okay.
And Janaki, hello, says harmonious is understood in Buddha's teachings as one who doesn't come into conflict with anyone or any situation, so that no one is hurt or harmed. Great, thank you. J. Lyles says, if one has unintentionally given instructions that led to harm and been informed of this outcome but ignored it, continue to give those same instructions, is it still unintentional? Okay.
Okay, so that they know it's harmful, but they ignore it and they continue to do the instructions. Well, no, I mean, once you know, then it's intentional. Then you know. Depends on this person might not think the harm is strong enough to stop doing what they do. But yeah, no, I mean, this is obviously, if you know that you're harming somebody, you want to not harm somebody or beings or whatever. It's kind of like the difference between the Jains and the Buddhists when it comes to walking down the street killing ants. If you walk down the street, you're going to kill lots of bugs and creatures. But if your intention is not to, then it's not karma, according to the Buddha, right? So, but as soon as you see that there are ants there and you start intentionally jumping on them, no, then you're creating not good karma. So, yeah. If you fully understand and know, then it's intentional. Now, we might be unmindful. We might quite not know. We might not see it clearly. But when you fully see it clearly and know, then it's intentional when you act on
it. Right, and Rick says, can you speak to the relationship between righteous indignation and conceit? Well, what comes to mind is actually, there was once actually a situation where I had kind of had to mediate it, and it was actually during a retreat, and this woman came and told me that she was having problems with another woman at the retreat, and yeah, we went kind of back and forth, and I was trying to understand the nuts and bolts, and actually, like, I realized that basically the woman that she was complaining about had done a lot of like passive aggressive things, and sometimes aggressive things during this silent retreat and so forth. And then as I was trying to kind of reconciliate them and tell them, hey, by the way, actually that lady, I've known her for a while. Sometimes, she can have some kind of improper ways of doing things, but she actually has she's a really good person. She's involved in social justice. So she's involved in women's rights and so forth. And when I said social justice and women's rights, the lady said, oh, that's why. And I remember I was like so surprised. I mean, I'm laughing now, but there I was like, I didn't get it straight away, and I was like, wait, what do you mean that's why? And she's like, oh, she's one of those. I'm like, what does that mean? And apparently, I don't know because I'm also not American, but anyway, so there is a kind of dynamic that I realized that can happen when we, because actually that the person that was doing all these unskillful sort of actions during the retreat is also someone who fosters a lot of righteous indignation. She's very smart and she knows a lot of things, and she has read pretty much any book on, on social justice that is ever possible, like very knowledgeable person, and has also very good commitment. But I feel like yeah, once again, the teachings of the Buddha are really powerful in the way that they explain to us what essentially also this other lady was kind of pointing out. And I realized later on that sometimes when you are nourishing so much those crazy defilements, when you're nourishing this anger so much, then it really ends up poisoning you. And instead of actually seeing clearly, understanding fully what you have on hand, what you have, your experience, you actually start developing a conceit of superiority towards everyone else, a conceit of thinking that you're the only one who's right and everyone else is wrong. And perhaps then you actually even turn into the oppressor. You start actually acting like the people that you're complaining about and reenacting essentially all the different things that you've read in the textbooks, but you're so oblivious to your actions because of this mix of like righteous indignation and conceit of superiority, of like, oh, look at all of these people are all so awful. You know, how often, like, it's so commonplace, for example, to find people that, yeah, perhaps are very rude and like are very grounded in terms of sexism, but they're completely oblivious to their racism, or vice versa. People who are completely, knowledgeable about racism and completely clueless about sexism, and actually acting upon it over and over again. So essentially, I would say that what is more interesting question is not like what is everyone else doing wrong, but rather what is the ism that is currently present in my mind? How is it manifesting? How am I oppressing people, if I'm oppressing people, or how am I discriminating on people? What are the prejudices that I hold? Those are actually extremely important questions to ask. How do they manifest? Am I acting upon them? Am I doing things that I'm not aware of? All of this process of that investigation is essentially, doing Dhamma work. But if we instead think that we are, kind of like the Messiah and we're all like right, whatever kind of, then it becomes a view, essentially. Only this is true, everything else is wrong. But instead, if we approach others going like, maybe they might be right, or what do they have to say? And we kind of go there with that attitude, maybe then we'll learn something. If not about the subject matter, we'll learn something about ourselves. Is righteous indignation a sin? Karma. That's it.
Well, sin is not really the right word to use in Buddhism, and it's not really it doesn't really fit. Righteous indignation is an emotion. It's a thing that's arising in the mind, in the body. How you act on it will be your karma, right? How you feed it, how you act on it, how you treat it, the choices you make because of it, that's your karma. Just because righteous indignation or anger or anything that arises in the mind, fear, lust, whatever arises in the mind, it's just what's arising in the mind. It's how you act on it, that's your karma.
Amaranta says, I have had difficulties to maintain equanimity at work. Groups have disputes, and I feel trapped because I started to work after the groups were formed, and now they ask again, which is my group?
Oh, boy.
I got angry with a coworker and I blamed her forcing me to do something I don't want. Now I feel bad, and yesterday I apologized. Oh, do you want to address that, Bante?
So you sounds to me like you came into a thorny situation, right? You were kind of thrown into a situation where you have these two groups, and they're kind of like competing or against each other, and they're like, it's kind of like you see in politics, or people will say like, you're either with us or you're against us. Like I remember that was in the war on terror years ago, and it's like now it's like you're either against all the racists or you are a racist or whatever. Like all these kind of things that are unfortunate human dynamics, unfortunate human tendencies, right? And if you're kind of like, well, I don't want to be part of either group, or you're kind of on the outside and you're looking and you're seeing this is all kind of really unskillful. I don't want to be a part of any of this, right? And so it's a tough situation to have to maneuver, right? Especially if you have no choice. What I would do is, to be honest with you, I would try to don't, how should I say, don't go against your principles, and don't try to do your best to not be wrapped up, even if you do have to be in one of the groups because of work or whatever. Try to be aloof from the fighting and the negativity. Try to just be like, hey, I'm part of this. I have to be a part of this group or whatever, but I don't have to join in the attacks about the other group, or the indignation about the other group, or anything like that, right? So try to maintain your principles and be as aloof as possible in the situation, while still having to do what you need to do. It's not an easy situation, and I don't envy you that situation. Mindfulness and try to do the best.
Yeah, sending you much metta, Maranta. And Julie says, what did the Buddha say about the speed of karma? It seems as though the outcome of my karma is speeding up as I'm following the precepts and doing mindfulness meditation. I feel like I'm playing a role in social situations because there is an increasing gap between the wisdom I'm developing from meditation to the conversations happening in samsara, like at my work. Where do we say it is considered lying and therefore breaking a precept? I'm careful not to manipulate or mislead, but I feel a little fake by playing this role. Oh, Julie says, I'm sorry, this is for mock chat. Okay, great. Yeah. Bring it up tomorrow for mock chat.
Yeah, we are actually, wow, we are coming close to the end already.
Yeah.
This has moved quick, so.
Yeah. And Sud says, Dear Venables, what is the difference between righteous indignation and knowing and acting against injustice in this world? What is the difference between righteous indignation, knowing and acting against injustice in this world? Well, I mean, knowing and acting against injustice, there's no anger in that sentence, or indignation. And righteous indignation, you can toss the indignation. Maybe you can keep the righteous if you're actually right, but also you can toss the righteous altogether. And just know and act against injustice in the world. That's as simple as that. Yeah, you don't need one for the other. And Sean is saying, to clarify, my belief is we let go of the perception of what ought to be, then we can still strive for goals without also suffering when expectations and reality don't match.
Expectations equal suffering. It's the way it is.
Yeah. It's, we're on the same page. And Jay Lai says, in the suttas, Vinaya, we sometimes see lay people criticizing the actions of bhikkhus and the matter being brought before the Buddha for resolution. Is this in this online setting, without the strength of local community, how should lay people shed light on misconduct in the Sangha? Bhante?
I think one of the best things to do is, if you think that a monastic is doing some kind of misconduct, is to bring it up with other monastics that you trust, right? Talk to them. Tell them, these are our concerns. What do you suggest? And I think that's very important. So at the very least, so you get information and you kind of understand, because even if you read the Vinaya, that might not be exactly how things are done in that monastic's tradition, or things might not go exactly like how you, if you think the Vinaya is how most monastic organizations live their life and exist in today, you're kind of, you don't know yet. It's just the way it is. So what I would do is I would seek advice, and not even necessarily like, like, oh, well, I'll go tell that monk and they'll handle it. Not necessarily, but it's really to kind of and it's not even to go tattletale on, like, oh, I'm going to go tattletale on this monk with that other monk. No, it's a kind of like, we have concerns. We want to see about addressing those concerns. What are our options? To find out the options, right? So, there's things that you can, I mean, if it's online stuff, like if you find out that there's misconduct, then it's very easy. Like you can just not log in. And that's easy. If it's in person, it's a little bit of a different story, right? So I'll give an example, right? In Sri Lanka, I remember like 4 or 5 years ago, a woman I've never met. She's in Sri Lanka, but she just friend requested me on Facebook, and for a couple of years she talks to me here and there, and I remember one time she messaged me and she says, Bante, she's like, we're finally taking action, because in Buddhist countries, just like in Christian countries of old, like, the little villages all had a chapel. In Buddhist countries, they all have like a little temple, and they have kind of like the abbot of that city or that village temple, who's kind of like the village shaman, the modern village shaman or whatever, just like the modern little priest would be. And she was telling me about how, this monk was a drunkard, and he was quite abusive to people and things like that. And the community finally came together to try to get him ousted and to try to get another monk to come, right? And so that was something that took time and contemplation and thought and thinking of what needs to be done and things like that. And and then something was done about it. So there's nothing wrong with, if you think that there's a monastic that's doing bad, with taking action against it. But you need to do so with full wisdom, full understanding. It's quite funny. Like like lay people lay people are obviously not expected to know the Vinaya, but like lay people will like oftentimes like freak out like over like a small rule that a monk breaks, and they'll like not really think it's serious when they break a worse rule because they don't know, right? So it's good to get other monks involved. That's what I would say, and to do it very mindfully, with metta and compassion for all involved.
Or sometimes they think that they're breaking a rule, but actually they're not, which is often happens. Actually, sometimes some people come up to me and tell me, oh, such and such like bhikkhu or such and such bhikkhuni has broken this precept. I'm like, that's actually not a precept. It's just a custom that is done in a particular culture, or maybe it's just a custom done by a particular community. That maybe we think it's actually the discipline, but it's not. For example, actually driving cars. This is a recent example that someone was like, oh, I don't like that particular community because the monastics drive. And I was like, what's wrong with that? And like, because they're not following the Vinaya. I'm like, well, actually, there were no cars back then. So there's definitely not that precept. But I mean, sometimes it's held actually in communities like Empty Cloud. Actually, the monastics don't drive. And it's not a particular precept that we're following, but rather it's korwat. So it's other implications. And it's also very complicated. For example, if you don't handle money to drive, just as simple as that. But of course, there are actually monastics that drive that get around that very easily with a lot of organization. We have enough organization to get even the driving. And yeah, there's different reasons perhaps why communities like ours hold that way of doing things that is also present in other communities. But that doesn't mean that the monastics that are driving, for example, are breaking the precepts. So it's always, we should double check. And sometimes we can just ask the monastic if we think that they are committing an infraction or that there's anything wrong with what they're doing. We can reach out to them personally and first check like what's going on. And so, Niramatiko, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to echo what you said as well, because it's very complex. So it's one of my things someone's breaking it. And it's not the monastic is breaking it, but also, as Bante said, it's good to go talk to another monastic, but I would also recommend a monastic that understands the video very well and knows it.
Yeah. It's complicated, the Vinaya, and also if you don't practice it, like if it just becomes another book on the shelf, then it's extra complicated because one doesn't really fully understand. It's just an abstract thing that we think we know, but we don't really know.
And we just have thank yous. I think we're to
all
the
right.
end here.
So, what is the AV team?
Audio-visual team.
Oh, yeah.
It's us.
Well, the audiovisual, if you'll ever come to Empty Cloud Monastery, you'll see that the audiovisual team is kind of technology from the 80s, I think.
Yes, we don't have people editing videos and doing all that kind of stuff. Most places don't, unless they're big and a layperson volunteers anyway.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in and for asking all these great questions. So tomorrow morning we'll have another teaching at 8 a.m., which probably will not be on admonishment and criticism, since I feel like we've done 2 talks in one tonight. So we'll pick another subject, and then tomorrow evening there will be monk chat. So we look forward to seeing you all at both times. All right. So we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you be well and happy, and may all good things come to you.